You drive a program called MAPS. By just taking a look at what you're doing in that initiative to renew the city, to build the infrastructure and so on, and also little things like recreational facilities, the schools and so on. How are you funding that program? And on the back of what value generation capability?
Well, we've been doing this for nearly 20 years now, but MAPS is a penny on the dollar sales tax, so a 1% sales tax, and it lasts for a specific amount of time, and it's a political campaign for the voters to pass it, and then we build projects that have been laid out prior to the election. So in 1993, we had a penny on the dollar sales tax for 5 years, and it ultimately built a new baseball stadium. It built some dams so we could create some river lakes. It built a canal through our entertainment district. It improved our performing arts center, improved our convention center. It built a new library downtown, put some improvements in the fairgrounds. So some basic infrastructure needs, but the amount of private investment that's followed in those areas and in surrounding areas has been extraordinary. It's been billions of dollars. We followed that up with a very similar penny on the dollar sales tax for our schools that allowed us to rebuild all of our inner city school districts. So all buildings have been refurbished or built anew. And then we just passed MAPS 3 and the process is coming out. But that's for a new convention center, a new streetcar system, a new downtown park, a new senior wellness center, sidewalks, jogging trails, improvements on the river for canoe, kayak, and rowing, and our fairgrounds.
Now, to a politician listening to what you just said, who does not live in the U.S. and perhaps comes from countries where they're a long way from creating that kind of program that is electable, you can throw out to the electorate and they can come back to you and say that that's what they want to participate in that. What needs to happen in the mind of a leader to want to do a penny a dollar tax instead of talking to an investment banker and collateralizing revenue streams maybe?
Right. A couple of things interesting about MAPS that are different from most funding processes. First of all, we pay cash, and so we collect the money before we spend it. So there's no debt on any of the MAPS projects, and that's fundamentally unique among the way governments typically spend. The other thing is it's a defined time period, and so our citizens understand what they're voting for, what will be built, and how long it'll take to raise that money.
So would an elected official in another country look at you and say, hey, but that's what you're supposed to be doing anyway? Aren't you politicizing social infrastructure?
No, we're giving the citizens a chance to determine their own tax rate. And so they're determining what their tax rate and the quality of life amenities that they'd like to have. So I feel it's a very democratic system. And fundamentally, and for a voter, do they believe that the city can do what they say they're going to do? And we've built up a certain amount of political capital where our voters believe that we're going to be able to complete the projects, as we said, on time and to either meet or exceed their expectations. The fact that we can do that is the reason we've been able to do it over and over again.
Would there be an alternative proposal to MAP that was put out to the electorate that didn't get through, that may still be a viable proposition?
Well, yeah, every community can do it differently, and certainly you can hire some sophisticated political polling units to go out and see what's possible in your specific community. But I think in general, passing a tax is very difficult. And so Oklahoma City is almost unique in its ability to have its citizens raise their taxes for quality of life amenities. And the other aspect of what Oklahoma City's political fortunes have shown is that it's almost seamless from one mayor to the next. There's not a bunch of stopping and starting. In other words, when I became mayor, no one lost their job. I retained the previous mayoral staff, and we basically just kept everything going right down the road. Too often in any sort of executive branch there's an election, there's a complete stoppage, everyone resigns, and then new people are brought in, and you stop and you start over and over and over again. In Oklahoma City, it's been a seamless transition now for over 20 years. And you see the city management remaining intact, and you see city councilors remaining intact, and you see city mayors who have cleanly handed off the reins of leading the city from one to the other.
And as a Republican, you are raising taxes. You're creating jobs. You're an organic, economic builder. Does that sort of put you somewhat at odds with the national Republican agenda.
When you put it that way, it does. But our taxes are really not that high. It's just that we've allowed our citizens to vote on them. If the citizens had turned it down, the taxes would have dropped. So I don't necessarily look at it as we have raised taxes. We've allowed our citizens to determine their tax rate. And the citizens seem very comfortable with the current tax rate that it is.
So at the national level, do you think that the whole question of raising taxes has been simplified way too over in the sense that, that the country is not able to respond to specific needs specifically, and instead it's like any tax is bad. Any tax means you're on this side, and more tax means you're on that side, basically.
Yeah, two thoughts to that. First of all, at the federal level, taxes are applied upon you. You don't get to go to the polls and vote on them. You're just told what the tax rate is, and you will pay it. And secondly, I don't know that the American citizens actually look at the federal taxes and say, this is what I'm receiving from it. All they see is some level of money squandered. The perception is that the money is not being spent well. In Oklahoma City, they can see the projects that we built. There's a perception that the money is being spent well and responsibly, and therefore they're willing to go to the polls and tax themselves for it. We have political capital that's built up in doing what we said we're going to do in a quality manner. And the federal government doesn't have that same political capital on its voters.
And finally, what's your commitment to the balanced budget? Do you think it's an important pillar of your economic model, or are there points at which a city, a state, a federal government needs to get off balance in order to deal with certain priorities?
Well, at the city level, we have a balanced budget. And at our state level, we have a balanced budget. And so I believe at those levels it's appropriate. At the federal level, we've just gotten so out of whack with our federal. We have such a deficit that I think a balanced budget amendment would probably be appropriate just to start bringing us in line. I don't necessarily know that you have to have a balanced budget at the federal level every year. I tend to think you can run into some level of debt, but we've let it go way too far. You can't be creating money at the rate we're creating it and think that that's sustainable.
Mick Cornett, the rest of the world is waiting for the U.S. to get its cause in order again, and it's very good to know that there is a city in the U.S. That's got its house in order, and so it's been very, very good for me to be able to speak to you here today.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed my stay here in Asia and look forward to Asians visiting the United States and specifically Oklahoma City.
Thank you so much.